Thank you, Bill. It makes me a little bit nervous up here to be wired, right? Just ask our ex-governor, right? What's going on. Anyway, I'm actually here to talk about two things today, really. I'm here to talk about cross-examination, and I'm here to talk about storytelling, okay? Because when we cross-examine, what we really want to do is use a monologue, okay? And during the monologue, we're going to narrate a fragmented and hopefully uninterrupted story of, through the prosecution's witnesses. Okay? When we take all of the cross-examinations of each of the prosecution's witnesses at the end of the case, and we put those cross-examinations together, what we're going to get is a story of innocence. Okay? We're going to get the story of innocence because when we cross-examine, we're going to destroy the prosecution's case, right? We're going to impeach their witnesses. We're going to show them that their witnesses are pieces of shit. We're going to show the jury why. Okay? We're going to gather everything, in addition to destroying their case, we're going to gather everything that we need. All right? Everything that we need so that at the end of the trial, we've got everything that we need so that when we go to the jurors and ask them to sign that not guilty verdict form, they have everything they're going to need, okay? Now, we step back for a minute and we say, is it an anomaly or a perversion, all right? In fact, that we're going to tell the story of innocence through the prosecution's witnesses, okay? But it's really not, and it's something that we all do all the time. When you think about it for a minute, think about how many times you get cases where you may not have any witnesses, right? And in some cases, you can't call your client. In a lot of cases, you can't call your client, all right? What we've got in that situation is, I suppose if you're religious, you can say some prayers, right? Okay? If you're not religious, you can think some pleasant thoughts, right, to help you try and get through the day. But otherwise, all we've got is cross-examination, okay? This is the state witness we got up here, okay? Or I'm sorry, go back one, please. Could you go back? This is our prosecution witness up here, right? A pretty scary witness, right? It scares us, right? When the prosecution calls witnesses, they scare us, and they should, because they're going to say bad things about our client, okay? This is the prosecution witness, all right? Now, can we go to slide 2, please? What we're going to do, if you remember this holiday classic, is we're going to defang that witness, okay? We're going to take his fangs away. But when I say that through cross-examination, we're actually going to tell the story of innocence through the prosecution's witnesses, okay, can we have slide number 3, please? This is what we're going to have, okay? We're going to have that scary person that approached us at first, and we defang them, and now what they're going to do is they're going to put the star on our tree, all right? And in that way, we're going to have those witnesses tell the story of innocence about our client, okay? It's going to be a thing of beauty, because when you tell the story of innocence through the prosecution's witnesses, you're going to gain credibility, right? You've told the jury things in opening statement, and now through their witnesses, you're going to deliver the things that you promised, okay? And really what we're saying is that we want to deliver on cross-examination enough ammunition so that when we hand the baton to the jurors at the end of the case and send them back into the jury room, they've got everything they need, again, to sign that not guilty verdict form. Okay, and you know what, a few years ago, there was somebody down here at the college, I think, that was talking about a case where they were talking about a jury deliberation, and this particular jury, they decided to flip a coin to decide a case. And you know what? Initially, it really disgusted me. That with somebody's freedom on the line, people would actually flip a coin to decide the case. And then you know what? I stepped back for a minute and I said, Terry, with the cases you get, your chances of winning just went up 48%. Okay, so let's talk now about why it is we're going to tell a story on cross. First of all, because storytelling is what we do, right? It's a timeless, effective, and natural way of relating a set of facts. So Tony talked about it, Keith talked about it, Lorinda talked about it. we've all talked about it, why it is we as human beings tell stories. I know that you all, when you're in the hallways, when you're in the cave, you're telling one another stories. They're funny stories. Some of them are even true, right? They've got some morals. They've got beginnings, middles, and ends, and they're entertaining, right? Remember Judge Joe Johnson said today, stories can be entertaining, okay? So that's the first reason why on Cross we want to tell a story, because it comes natural to us, all right? And it's the way that we tell stories. The second reason we want to tell a story on Cross is because the rest of our case, when you think about it, is presented in terms of a story, isn't it? The opening statement is presented in terms of a story, right? Direct examination is. Even voir dire, as we saw yesterday, when you're voir diring potential jurors. When you get those potential jurors to share stories with you, you can then make good judgments about them, okay? We share stories with them by way of self-disclosure. So basically the storytelling function is something that, runs on throughout the trial, and as the case is being tried, I think most importantly, the jurors are composing a continuing story. Okay, so after today, you gave them a powerful opening statement, and now on cross-examination, with your opening statement, you've given them a context within which to compartmentalize the evidence, a place to put the evidence, and you've given them the good view of how they should view the evidence, and that's through the story of innocence. And the third reason I think why we want to think about cross-examining in terms of telling a story, and this to me is pretty simple, is that the best story at trial wins, right? I mean, all other things being equal, it's always been my thought, you know, if the lawyers are equal and the facts are equal, or usually they're not for us, but most trials, when you look at them, the most powerful, persuasive story is going to win the trial. Okay, so, and let's face it, if you don't have that 48% lift with the coin flip, all right, you're going to need to tell the most powerful story at trial. Okay, read the next slide, please. We have to accept on cross-examination that it's going to be a fragmented story that we tell, okay? And it's going to be fragmented in two ways. The first way is the story is going to be fragmented through the use of the witness, okay? Unfortunately, the witness has to be in court when we cross-examine them, right? But as we see, we're going to minimize their role, and that witness has to sit there and basically say yes to our statements, okay? Or occasionally no, as the situation dictates, but for the most part, they're going to sit there and say yes to our statements, okay? And when we talk about the fragmented story in terms of the witness being on the stand, you can see it in a good transcript, right? Whenever you look at a good transcript, a good cross-examination, you look down and it's yes, 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 no, 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 yes, 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 right on down the line. That's going to be a good transcript. Other times, of course, we try a case, we think we did a brilliant transcript, and we get that and we say, God, this court reporter sucks. Right? I mean, that happens to us. But by and large, you know, we're looking at the transcripts and the line of yeses from the witness, and that's going to show us, that's going to be our fragmented story. Now, our story is going to be fragmented on cross in a second way, okay, which is that the story of innocence, okay, on cross-examination is going to be piecemeal, okay? We've got to understand that in general, we're not going to get the entire story of innocence from one witness in most cases. It's going to be through 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, some cases 20 witnesses through whom we're going to deliver that story of innocence, okay? It's going to be piecemeal. We got to understand we're not going to go in and Perry Mason any witness, all right? Anybody ever Perry Mason a witness, by the way? Anybody at all? Okay, now we got, what, not, probably 100 and some people, nobody's ever done it, okay? It's not going to happen, okay? We've got to understand that a good cross-examination, in a good cross-examination, we're not going to win on a knockout, we're going to win by scoring points, okay? That's how we're going to win. We're not going to get the Perry Mason ending. And by the way, I think when you look at Perry Mason, I think that he had a few, I don't think the guy ever gave a closing argument, did he? Right? I mean, he was incredible. But I think, the reason for that is that he, Perry Mason, he had a great investigator, didn't he? Right? And he had an excellent secretary. Remember that? But the biggest reason I think is that he wrote his own script. Okay, I mean that's the reason Perry Mason never had to give never had to give a closing argument. So we can't count on the fact that, that we're going to knock out any witness. So let's put that aside, okay? It's going to be a fragmented story. Could we have the next slide, please? Oh, okay, thank you. We've talked, really, ad nauseum about theory of the case, theory of the case, theory of the case. Well, that's because it really does dictate everything we do in the courtroom. In terms of cross-examining witnesses, we should have not only a theory of the case, but I think we also want to have a theory of each witness. Okay, a theory of each witness, where they fall in the case. Think about that witness's motivations. Okay, think about where that witness falls as a character in the case. Is this witness somebody who's mistaken? Are they lying? Are they a seasoned detective? Are they a snitch? Are they a child? Where does this person fall in the case? And just as, again, I like to refer to a lot of storytelling concepts. A good story relies on emotion to move the story, right? We want to take a good, close look at the emotional makeup of each witness. What are the emotions driving this witness? What are the motivations driving this witness? Okay? We want to get a view of the witness, but also, and I think Lori just exemplified the tremendous value in looking at things through the first person. Okay, in terms of brainstorming our cases, we want to think about each witness in the first person from their point of view and think about, really delve into what it is they're looking for, what are they trying to get, why are they involved in this case, okay? A lot of times what we're going to see is that when we get a theory of each witness, okay, and we look at the emotions of that witness, believe it or not, you're going to see it's the emotions of the witness that prove that our client is innocent. Okay? I'll give you an example. Let's take your run-of-the-mill robbery case. All right? You've got, Ms. Jones is walking home, and as she's walking home, she's obviously drained from work, very tired and eager to get home. Okay? At some point, there's a gun shoved in her face. She's frightened to death. Right? Understandably frightened to death. And now afterward, after being tired, after being frightened to death, the third step is she now goes to the police station and she's full of anger and vengeance, right? She wants justice and she's going to pick somebody out. Well, when we look at this case and we break down that witness emotionally into those, on those three levels, that's what shows that Mr. Smith is innocent, okay? The fact that she was drained from work and frightened, okay, she wasn't paying attention. Right? She's not paying attention to what's going on. Okay? The fact that she's, frightened and frightened by the gun when somebody puts a gun in her face shows what? It shows that she didn't get, you wouldn't get a good look at the person that robbed you. Okay? And now the fact that she's full of anger and vengeance, like any of us would be, think, if when your car window gets kicked in, how do you feel about your car window? Right? You come out, well, what's the feeling anyway? What's the feeling you have when your car window gets kicked in? Anger, fury, right? Okay, now that's just a car window. We're talking about having a gun stuck to your face. So now she has a gun stuck to her face and is then brought to the police department. And the fact that she's full of anger and vengeance is going to explain why she's going to pick an innocent man in the lineup. Okay? So think in terms of the emotions of the witness and how it is in a lot of cases. It's the emotions of that witness that are really going to make our story of innocence plausible. Okay, same thing applies for a snitch. When you think about a snitch and what's motivating a snitch and the emotions of that snitch, being locked up in a hellhole jail cell, okay, for days on end, that's going to be, motivate that witness. They have nowhere to go, no way to get out, and it's the emotion of wanting to get out that's going to cause them to lie against our client. Okay, so. Again, a lot of times you're going to see when you're willing to look at the first person, from the first person point of view of the witness, look at those emotions and you're going to find, believe it or not, you're going to find your story of innocence there. If nothing else, it's going to make your story of innocence more plausible and more powerful. Okay? And by the way, and this is something that is Grover in here? I don't know if Grover's in here, but the Grover talks about that, when you're willing to connect with the case on that emotional level, you're going to have a greater ability on your cross-examination of taking your story of innocence and connecting it emotionally with the jurors, okay? Next slide, please, if you could, thank you. We also want to consider our demeanor, okay? We want a theory of each witness, considering their emotions. We want to think about our demeanor as we cross-examine witnesses. And think about what effect it is that you want your cross to have on the jury, okay? Keeping in mind that the way we speak to people sends messages to others around us, right, as to how we want those others to feel about this person, okay? So think about your demeanor. How do we want the jury to feel about this witness, right? And what we do is, Keith talked about the music in the courtroom, right? Perry Mason, remember that was a great shit. He had his own music in the courtroom. Remember that? It would go off. I mean, I've always wanted that where I'm getting ready to impeach a witness and you go, boom, and the trumpets blare and everything goes crazy. Wouldn't that be awesome? But we don't really have that. But unfortunately, not in Cook County. But I'm working on it. Maybe I'll talk to Judge Joe Johnson about that. But anyway, what we can do, short of having music in our courtrooms, is we're going to be the music in the courtroom. Okay? And on cross-examination, you're going to be the music in the courtroom using your demeanor, using your pace, okay, using the tone of your voice, and using your cadence, right? The cadence within which you're going to cross. So you're going to be the music in the courtroom. Think about in terms of a simple thing like the tone, volume, and emphasis of your voice. You can say, on the one hand, you can say, "You never told the police the car was blue." Okay? Or you can say, "You never told the police the car was blue." Okay? Saying the same thing, but it's sending a different message, all right? The first message is, "You're a lying sack of shit. You're full of shit. We're not going to believe you." The second one is, "Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe not. We'll sort it out. Don't worry about it. Thank you. Get out of here." You know what I mean? In a real nice way, we take the witness and handle them that way. So think about the demeanor you want to use on each witness. You want to, in some senses, be prepared, but be ready to adapt. Okay? There's going to be witnesses that are going to hit the stand that you expect to be harsh. They're going to be easy, and vice versa. There's some that you think are going to be easy, and they're going to hit that stand, and boy, you're going to have your hands full. So always be ready to adapt. And when I say be ready to adapt, be ready to take that music that you're setting through your demeanor and through your cadence and through your voice, the way you use your voice, and you can keep resetting that. Okay? That's basically, as Lori Shanks, is Lori in there? I stole this from Lori. Lori basically talks about, setting the music, setting the mood, lighting the candles, and setting the stage. Okay? We do that on cross through these things, through our demeanor, and you can reset that mood as often as you want. Okay? Sometimes with one particular witness, it's going to vary, it's going to change. All right? But prepare that, think about that, and be ready to adapt. In considering your theory of the case and what it is you need to argue, think about the fact that most people are going to tell us that, well, not all witnesses need to be cross-examined, which is true, right? We always say, which is true, if somebody didn't hurt you, don't ask them any questions. But be a little bit more creative than that, okay? A witness may not have hurt you, but can they help you, okay? Can you use this witness maybe to create consistencies with your story of innocence, okay, with your theory and with your story of innocence? A prosecution may not hurt you, but if you're able to, to bring forth part of your story through that witness, it's going to make your sell at the end of the case easier, okay? You're going to have the prosecution witnesses basically overlap, okay, your story of innocence. Think about where you might contradict other prosecution witnesses. A witness may not hurt you per se, but you could say, you know what, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to get this witness to contradict another prosecution witness. And also think in terms of the fact that, which witness is it that's going to be easiest to get information from? If you want to get the makeup of a lineup, it's probably, it may be easier through the detective than it is through the complaining witness, okay, or victim, depending on what they are. We'll talk about that later, about language and terms. So be creative with regard to that. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Let's talk now about the sources of the story on cross-examination. Every story that, we've got, when we talk about our sources, you've got your story of innocence, you've got your theory of the case, and then you've got what I'm going to call the right to have your relevant statements affirmed. Okay? The right to have your relevant statements affirmed. Given those three things, be creative and ask yourself, if I could get this witness to say anything in the world, what would it be? Okay? Let me step back for a minute. When I talk about the right to have your relevant statements affirmed, that's just another way of saying what we generally say in court, which is when the judge is trying to curtail our cross-examination, sustains an objection, we say, Your Honor, I have a right to have my relevant questions answered, right? I mean, that's the way we use it in court. Don't use the phrase I'm giving you in court, okay? But what I want you all to, the way I want you to think about cross from now on is not, for your purposes, is not the right to have relevant questions answered, but the right to have relevant statements affirmed, because that's really what we're going to do on cross-examination. Okay, so we're going to talk about the sources, and again, if you could get the witness to say anything, what would it be? The first source is going to be undisputed facts. Okay, undisputed facts are going to be. We really want these to be the backbone of our story on cross. They're going to be facts from witness statements, right? Police reports, photographs, rap sheets, grand jury transcripts, and police manuals. Don't be shy about subpoenaing those things. If there's something in the case and it looks fishy, subpoena the police manuals. These are some of the best things that we can use to cross-examine witnesses, cross-examine police officers in the case. You would be shocked to see how many times their own manuals tell them they shall do something and they don't do it, okay? When there's lineups conducted, make sure you subpoena whatever department it is, subpoena their general orders for conducting lineups, etc. So we've got our undisputed facts, and these are going to be things that, again, we're able to either get out from the witness or we know we're going to prove them up, okay? We want to, of course, conduct a thorough investigation, all right? We want to speak to every witness out there. If we have time at the end of today, we'll talk about the fullness letter and how I can guarantee that you're going to get more out of the witness that won't talk to you than it's going to be the best situation you've ever had, okay? If we have time, we'll talk about that. But we want to conduct a thorough investigation, all the witnesses, in particular the scene, all right? When you've been to the scene, you should never try a case, right, without going to the scene of the crime. You really just can't do it, all right? I mean, you've got to go to the scene, and for a couple of reasons. One is when you've been to the scene, it's going to help you control the witness. The witness is going to know you've been there, and as you're cross-examining them, they're less likely to run away on you, okay? In a second sense, maybe a more important sense, it's important to go to the scene because the jury's going to know you've been there, and they're going to know that you care enough about your client that you went there, okay? So it's critical to go to the scene. You want to be that person in court. When Keith talked about ethos, this is one of the things, one of the ways we build that. We'll talk more about that later. So as and as defense lawyers, we can't just say, well, let's think outside the box a little bit. Frankly, we got to live outside the box, right? I mean, we really do. You get cases where the officer says, Mr. Smith dropped the drugs, I picked up the drugs and arrested Mr. Smith. I mean, where are we going to go with that, right? It's a hopeless situation, or so it appears, unless we're willing to, get out, bang on some doors, ask some neighbors what they saw, and you'd be shocked. I mean, I go all over the city of Chicago banging on doors, and you'd be shocked how many people come out and say, yeah, I know something about that arrest, or somebody else knows something about that arrest, and how we find good people that are helpful, that want to help us out. So get out, bang on some doors, take some pictures of the scene, and conduct a thorough investigation. A second area of, in terms of the sources, are going to be what I like to think of as common sense questions, okay? Basically, I break these down into two areas. You got plausibility statements and verisimilitude statements, okay? By using common sense statements on cross-examination, it's going to be one of the best ways that we have to demonstrate to the jurors the partisanship or the motivation of a prosecution witness, okay? And when we use common, I'll talk about what I mean about this in a minute, but when we use common sense statements in cross-examination, when you get the yes answer, you're going to win, you're going to move your story, you're going to further your theory, and if the witness says no, you're going to gain even more in the greater battle of credibility. Okay? In terms of how this is going to work, basically, when the witness says no, they're going to create a credibility dissonance between themselves and the jury because they said no, okay? Let's talk about plausibility. Plausibility basically just refers to, these aren't things that are undisputed facts, but these are things that are commonly held beliefs, okay? We and everybody in the jury agree that we all believe this, we all believe these things, all right? With the snitch, fair to say you don't want to go back to jail, right? Okay? Yes answer furthers our story, furthers our theory. No answer, the witness is going to create dissonance, credibility dissonance between themselves and the jury, okay? You have an officer on the stand. When you wrote your report, you wanted to be complete, yes, and accurate and truthful, okay? Officers will fight you on this stuff all the time, and it's great stuff. And again, we'll talk about that in a bit as to why. Verisimilitude, the way things were, okay, the truth. Okay, you're impeaching a witness with an inconsistent statement, and you're going to basically use verisimilitude when you step back and say, well, when you were trained, you went to the academy, and you took courses there, and the courses were taught by instructors that taught you to be a police officer, taught you to be a good police officer. One of the courses you took was in report writing, okay, et cetera, et cetera. This is basically just a little snippet out of, as if we were impeaching by inconsistent statement. But this is basically verisimilitude, okay, the way things were. Same thing with plausibility. We've got a situation where when the witness says yes, it's furthering your story, moving your story along. It's furthering your theory. When the witness says no, they're going to create dissonance, credibility dissonance between themselves and the jurors, okay? Things not done. The third area really, I think, to go into is things not done. Tony talked about this in somewhat of a different context. Impeaching a witness by way of things not done, I think, can be done really in two ways, okay? And this is something that's really public, or it's a criminal defense lawyer special, but especially for those of you that are public defenders, and I know you get some cases where you really don't have a good defense, it's hard to find. You say, well, in some cases, it's hard to find good sources for my theory on cross, or for my story on cross. Things not done is a great area for this, okay? Things not done really falls into, I think, two. You can look at it in two ways. One is, when you look at the police investigation of the case, ask yourself, what is it that they did and what didn't they do, or what could they have done, okay? If they didn't get prints or DNA or take photographs, okay? If they didn't in an armed robbery, or in a robbery or armed robbery case, that's in a residential area, if they didn't go and knock on every door in the block, right? There were witnesses, potential witnesses that may have seen things up there in those houses, all right? So, what did the police do? What could they have done? And then ask yourself, in terms of the prosecution case, what does the prosecution have, okay? Think about what they have and say, if the prosecution had an open and closed case, what would they have, okay? And by the way, to fit these in a story format, we don't want to just cross these necessarily in terms of a list. We want to go to what I think Tony called this points of choice. I call them choice points either way, but that the witness, particularly with officers, that they made a choice, okay? Officer, I want to ask you some questions about what happened as you were at the scene. You understand? Yes. You made some decisions. Yes. You chose not to call somebody to take fingerprints, right? You chose not to call somebody to take photographs. You chose not to call the lab to have somebody come down and look for DNA or whatever the case may be. So think about choice points, okay? When you're putting together your story, be creative. These are three areas you can use. Be creative, and you can combine these three areas in any way you like. Be creative as to how you put them together. okay? And sometimes, though, obviously, when we're crossing, we're not there, we're not there to gamble, we're not there to fish, and, there's probably enough prison cells filled up with people for people that stood on cross and gambled and fished. So we don't want to do that, but by the same token, what we do want to do is we want to make sure that we listen, okay? The witness, hopefully they're just saying yes, occasionally they're not going to. We want to make sure that we listen to what it is the witness gives us, okay? Now, when I say listening, what I mean is true empathetic listening, okay? Not chomping at the bit and talking and waiting to talk, okay? That's what most lawyers, their idea of listening is this talking and waiting to talk, right? What we want to do is empathetically listen, so that in addition to our story of innocence that we get from our undisputed facts and things not done, and plausibility, verisimilitude statements, okay, maybe we're going to get more, okay? Maybe the witness gives us some more ammunition. So what we're going to talk about now are what are the, in terms of cross-examining, what are the sort of the blocking and tackling, all right? Sort of the things that are going to enable us to tell a story. Can we have the next slide, please, okay? The first is going to be once upon a time, okay? Now, are we actually going to say once upon a time as we cross? Anyone? No, we're not going to say once upon a time. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that phrase once upon a time and stick it up in our noodle as we begin to cross, all right? Let the silent phrase once upon a time ignite your cross-examination, and when you do, when you get into that mode, into the once upon a time mode, that's what's going to encourage you and allow you to get into the storytelling mode. Once upon a time is going to allow you to get into the mode where you can then narrate your story of innocence, okay, on cross. So we typically and traditionally, when we talked about cross, people used to, and I think in the old days they asked questions actually, right? And then, more recently people ask leading questions. All right, what I'm going to ask you all to do is to sort of change your mindset on that, and I'm going to ask that we not ask questions, nor do we ask leading questions on cross, okay? Questions, even leading questions, what they do is they invite answers, they invite diversion, they invite the witness to play some role in what we're doing, okay? We're going to be better suited when we tell, can we have the next slide, please? Thank you so much. We're going to be better suited in our cross when we stay away from questions, even leading questions, and we cross-examine using short statements, okay? We want to use short statements because when we cross using short statements, it gives us the best, we can best guarantee that we're not going to abrogate our right to be the storyteller, okay? And again, even with leading questions, any kind of questions, even leading questions, are going to encourage interplay between the witness. We don't want that interplay, right? What we want to do on cross is we want to control the story that's being said, and we're going to do this best through the use of short statements. Why do we want to make them short? Well, for a couple reasons. One is when you go to a long statement, it's just going to get confusing, right? Have you ever seen somebody in court? This is kind of like the LA law syndrome that you stepped out of Cagney's bar and you walked westbound, and then you got in your red car and you headed southbound in your car over to Murphy's Pub, and then you walked in Murphy's Pub and you saw John, right? And the witness says no. Right? What do we do with that? Okay? What we got to do is we got to break that up. Okay? Break it up into little bits. Okay? So we want to be short. We also want to be short because there's been, studies have been done on interviews that, in general, when you talk about an interview in general, that long questions invite long answers, short questions invite short answers. Okay? So what we want is a short statement that's going to demand a yes answer. And I think from from the point of view of credibility, and maybe most importantly, we want to be short with our statements, because when our statements are short, we're going to keep the witness in the disjunctive mode, and we're going to stay in the narrative mode, okay? And when you talk to communication people, they'll all tell us that when people are in the narrative mode, okay, their credibility goes up, right? When they're in the disjunctive mode, their credibility is going to go down, all right? So given our constraint of having to use the witness as we cross-examine them, we want to make sure we keep them in that disjunctive mode, okay? Now, to make our statement short, and in fact, to make it a statement, what we're going to do is we're going to have to break a habit that we probably all have. So we're going to take a vowel in a minute here. Can we get the next? We're going to lose our taglines, okay? Isn't that correct? Isn't that a fact? Could you all put up your right hands, please, and take a vowel? I promise.
I promise
that I will not use taglines.
that I will not use taglines
Because they sound like shit.
because they sound like shit.
They're unnatural to a story.
They're unnatural to a story.
And it's just another example of the bullshit that law school put in my head.
This is another example of the bullshit law school put in my head.
Thank you very much. Beautiful. Okay. We want to get rid of our taglines, okay? Taglines, isn't that correct? Isn't that a fact? Isn't that right? Blah, blah, blah. Correct. And of course you say, yeah, but Terry, that's what I learned in law school, right? Well, that's the same law school that tried to suck your humanity out, right? At its best, right? It tried to suck every little bit of your beautiful storytelling ability out, right? It tried to suck all that out of you, and it had you talking about exiting a vehicle? Are you kidding me? Right? Okay, we're going to get rid of it. Think about it. It's just legalese BS. Now imagine, if you don't want to believe me, imagine you take if you've got a son, daughter, a niece, or nephew, and you take them on your lap, right? And you say, you know what, I'm going to tell you a little story, okay? And once upon a time, there was a little girl in the woods, correct? She ran into a bear, isn't that correct? She was all alone, correct? Okay? Right. This kind of stuff, I mean, it's something that we laugh about, but lawyers do it all the time, okay? We don't want to interrupt what's going to be a good story on cross with silly lawyer phrases, all right? We don't want the jury to end up with a head full of, isn't that correct? Isn't that a fact? Correct. What we want to do is let the language that we've carefully selected, okay, we're going to talk in a while about the fact that on cross, beautiful thing, you get to put words in the mouths of the prosecution witness. Only time you get to do it at trial, beautiful thing, right? Okay, we want to let that language that we've carefully selected prompt the yes answer. And we want to make sure that what's important to our story of innocence on cross is not lost in a whole garble of isn't that correct, isn't that a fact, etc. Okay? We'll talk now about, can we go to the next slide, please? One exception to short is going to be when we're looping. A lot of you know how to do this. I want to talk about it for a minute. Looping basically is, what looping is going to be is, I think for all intents and purposes, is the rhetorical device of repetition. Okay, but it's the tool we use on cross-examination. Some of you probably did it in your voir dires yesterday. Anyone do it in voir dire yesterday? Okay, you did it in your voir dires, right? Looped with your potential jurors. It's a beautiful thing on cross. And again, it's the only time in a trial we get to put words in the mouths of the prosecution witnesses. Okay, our looping tool allows us to repeat those answers, to repeat those words. Okay, repetition. So it basically, as an example, you saw, play with me for a minute, Meg. So you saw a house. Yeah, we got it here.
Yes.
Okay, it was a brick house
Yes.
at Chicago Avenue in Holman.
Yes.
And the brick house at Chicago Avenue in Holman had a porch.
Yes.
And the brick house at Chicago Avenue in Holman with the porch. Okay, y'all see where I'm going? Okay, what we're doing is we're taking a previous answer, a previous yes, and we're going to use it in a subsequent statement. Okay? But what we want to do is we want to be in the habit of being able to loop and being comfortable looping, and then we want to loop in a theory-based way. Okay? So when you get good answers, this is a way we can prolong them. Think in terms of listen, repeat, and utilize. Okay? For looping. Listen, repeat, and utilize. Listen to what you've got, repeat it, and then utilize it as needed in a theory-based way when you get your good answers. The complaining witness, not victim, but complaining witness, or let's say deceased in a self-defense case, right? they had a 5-inch shank, and somebody talked about that 5-inch shank. We're going to loop that. And as he was holding that 5-inch shank, you saw Mr. Jones walking over. Yes, and he was holding that 5-inch shank, okay? We're going to loop that. It comports with our theory of the case. It's consistent with our theory of the case, so we're going to loop that. We can also, by the way, do this, in terms of our exceptions to short, and we talk about looping. We said we're going to have a theory of each witness. We may also have themes of each witness, maybe through a trilogy. Trilogies, by the way, are a beautiful thing. The ancient Greeks, it goes back to the days of the ancient Greeks. Why they're beautiful and why they're persuasive, I don't know. They all died before they could tell us. But there's a lot of power in trilogy. So assuming you've got an interrogation case and it's your job to explain to the jurors why it is somebody who's innocent would sign a confession admitting to an alleged confession admitting to something they didn't do, and you've got your detective. Generally, you know how these go. The detectives are in and out several times over the course of a day or 2 days or whatever the case may be. So maybe you establish through your detective that when you stop, when you finish talking to Mr. Jones, and I'll use you, Erica, you walked out of the room,
Yes,
closed the door,
yes,
and clicked the lock shut.
yes.
Okay, now, when we get the detective later on, we're going to repeat that again. It's a theme that we're going to develop on cross-examination based on this witness later on after another bit of interrogation, all right? And when you left the room, you walked out of the room, closed the door, and clicked the lock shut, okay? Right, I mean, we're gonna loop our answers there, all right? What we're doing is we're encapsulating a message through a theme, right? That the detective's in control of the situation, that Mr. Jones, who's in custody, has nothing to say about this, and that he's not going anywhere until he tells them what it is they want him to hear, okay? And it's gonna be memorable. We're gonna make it memorable through repetition. So for tomorrow, whatever witness you're gonna cross, think in terms of maybe a nice theme of the witness you can create with the trilogy. So we've got, so far what we've got is we've got our series of short statements, all right? Now, when you think about it though, you've got your theories of, your series of short statements. You may have 100, 200, maybe 1,000 or 3,000 statements to which you want the witness to say yes, right? And what we want to do now is think about how we're going to break that up, right? When we talk about good storytellers and good writers, what good storytellers and good writers do is they signal change to the listener, right? They signal change to the audience. They let the audience know where they're going. The effect that we want on cross isn't going to be James Joyce stream of consciousness, right? Where we just haphazardly take series of statements and throw them all over the wall, all over the wall, and hope the jury can sort them out, okay? So what we want to do is make our cross-examination juror-friendly, and we're going to do that through the use of, where are we at now? Can we go one more, please? Next slide, please. Thank you so much. Through the use of transitions, okay? Transitions, some people call these marquee questions or headline questions. What they are, in a sense, it's sort of the practical substitute to once upon a time. We can't really say in court, well, once upon a time, and you were in your car, blah, 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 right? We're going to use the transition to do that, okay? And again, when we talk about transitions, we're not talking about the law school crap. I'm sure we've all done this. Tell me if you haven't. I'm directing your attention to August 13th, 2007, at or about 3:30 in the afternoon in the vicinity of or near 3358 West Madison Street. What, if anything, unusual occurred at that time, right? Anybody ever done that? Anybody ever not done that? Come on. All right? We've all done that. So I'm not talking about that crap. I'm talking about something real simple, okay? Transitions. I'd like to ask you some questions about the interrogation room. You understand, okay? I'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Mr. Jones. You understand. I'd like to ask you some questions about what happened when you pulled Mr. Murphy's car over. You understand. Okay? Real straightforward. All right? Transitions. I'm going to read a little quote here, if I can find it, by Minnick on public speaking. He says, "Good transitions are useful to the audience because they make clear the thought patterns of the speaker and the relationship of evidence to the conclusion it supports. in the form of internal summaries. Good transitions aid memory, recall, and understanding of the speaker's material. All pretty good things, right? Don't we want all those things? Right, as we're telling our story on cross. So, transitions are going to be a natural and effective way to break up the material, to signal to the jurors that we're moving on to a new topic, okay? We're going to let the jurors know exactly what part of the story we're going to, so they can follow us, right? It's going to allow us to jump around so we don't lose jurors, right? In sort of some James Joyce kind of way. And it's really, I think, the most, in terms of the jurors, it's really going to allow better memory, better recall, and better understanding of the story of innocence we're presenting on cross, okay? So we want to use a lot of transitions. Now let's think for a minute about the transitions from our point of view. What they're going to allow us to do is they're going to allow us to get the witness in the yes mode and to follow with a series of short statements, okay? It's hard to just start making statements. We want some context for those statements. So somebody who wants to play my witness here. What's your name?
Katie.
Katie, here's the detective here. I'd like to ask you some questions about the interrogation room. You understand?
Yes.
It's 10 foot by 10 foot
Yes.
with white walls.
Yes.
There's no windows,
Right.
no wall hangings,
Right.
no lock on the inside,
Yes.
no light switch on the inside.
Yes.
There's a metal bench with a metal cuff bar attached to it.
Right.
Okay, you see what we're doing? It's that transition that allows me to get into this. I'd like to ask you some questions about your relationship with Mr. Jones. You understand?
Yes,
You've known him for 20 years,
yes,
met him in college
yes,
when the two of you were in the same fraternity, sorority, whatever, right? Okay, you see what I'm saying? So it's these transitions that are going to allow us to follow with our short statements, okay? And I know that it's going to be odd at first using these things, but I think once you see other people use them, it'll make sense. They're just like the pause and silence. These really aren't about you, the speaker, they're about the listener, okay? It's going to make what you're doing on your story across. Again, it's going to aid the jury's memory and understanding of what you're doing. When we tell our story of innocence on cross using our transitions, okay, followed by our short statements, we're going to get a beautiful byproduct from that. Can we get the next screen, please? Thank you so much. We're going to get the witness in the yes mode, okay? Yes mode, or, as I said, occasionally no's. Occasionally we're going to get a no, you never did this, blah, 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 but usually yeses. Yes, 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 yes. In this way, we're going to keep that witness out of the narrative mode in the disjunctive mode, okay? And the effect on you, the lawyer, is going to be great. You're going to see that you are not going to be bickering, right? You're not going to be bickering as what has been traditionally taught with cross, all this bickering and fighting with the witness. You're not going to be bickering, okay? What you're going to be doing is you're really going to be the only speaker, okay? You're going to be putting words in the mouth of the witness, okay? And the beautiful thing, and I want you all to get a sense of this tomorrow, when you get the witness in the yes mode, it's going to be as if you're testifying, okay? As if you're actually testifying, all right? So when you get the witness in the yes mode, using your transition and short statements, you're going to dominate the witness without being domineering, okay? And that's important. We can't be domineering in the courtroom, right? Keith talked about this. When we go into the courtroom, our credibility as criminal defense lawyers, jurors like us at first about as much as they like a head cold or a sneeze screen, okay? We're not going in there high in credibility. So, I want you to think about how we're going to dominate the witness without being domineering. And by the way, tell me if this ever happens to you. If it ever does, it's the best thing. The prosecutor in the typically whiny voice, objection, judge. Counsel is testifying, right? Don't you love that one? Or objection, judge. Counsel's putting words in the mouth of the witness. Damn straight, no, sit down, move on, shut up. Okay? That's going to be the best. If that ever happens to you, let me know. Then you're doing some great cross because you are putting words in the mouth of the witness, okay? The effect on the witness, when you get the witness in the yes mode, the witness is going to see that you're really not interested in what they have to say, okay? You're going to get them conditioned to say yes. They're going to be in the habit of saying yes. They really have no choice to say yes. And when you get that witness in the yes mode, you're going to see that you're going to get them to say just about anything. You know, fair to say you don't want to go back to jail. Yes. You like sex. Yes. With guns. Yes. Boom. Okay. All right. You're going to get the witness to say just about anything. The effect on the jury is that the jury's going to look at you, and they're really, you know, again, Keith talked about ethos. And this is where we get it on cross-examination, because the jury's going to look to you as somebody that's telling the truth, that knows all the facts, and as being the person that they can rely on to get these facts from, okay? The jury's going to look to you as that person. So the end result now is we've got a nice, you know, a nice system here where we're going to take our transitions followed by short statements, get the witness in the yes mode, and we're going to tell our story. Let's talk, can we get the next slide, please? Thank you. Let's talk for a minute about pacing the cross and slash running the video, okay? A couple of concepts that we want to work with. How are we doing on time, by the way? We're okay, right? Okay. Let's talk about running the video. I want you all to think about cross-examination as a visual, okay? And I want you to think as you're crossing as if you're running a video camera, okay? Think about the visuals. Good storytellers help us as an audience. They make their stories persuasive by making it a visual experience, okay? I want you all to do the same thing. Jurors are going to remember better when they conjure up images in their heads. When they have images that are going to stick in their heads, they're going to remember things better. So I want you to think about how we're going to pace the cross and run our video in three areas, okay? The first is simply speeding up and slowing down, okay? You've got the power to speed up and slow down your cross. Imagine for a minute you're watching TV during the NCAA tournament and you see a replay, right? The one team has 2.5 seconds. They've got the ball. They inbound the ball. Somebody drains a shot. They win the game. Everyone jumps up, cheers. Yay, we win. Okay, that's 2.5 seconds. Now, if you were to listen to a player or the coach and they were explaining what's going on, it's going to take about 5 to 7 minutes, really, right? Because they're going to say, well, number 5, Smith, is inbounding the ball over here. And what happened was number 3, Jones, came off a back screen around up top, came off a back screen. Jones inbounded to number 3, okay? In the meantime, number 16 is down in the corner, and he's throwing a back screen for number 15, who's coming across the way. 15 then is going to pop out to the key, and that's when number 3 is going to dribble over a few times. He's going to pass him the ball, and he's going to shoot the ball. All right, you see what I'm saying? What we're doing is we're slowing this down, okay? We can do this in a theory-based way with our cases. Let's go back to our robbery case. You know, you've got Ms. Smith, who, let's say she's a true victim, not a complaining witness, but she was robbed. And, you know, when we're talking about the facts of the robbery, we're going to move quickly, right? I want to ask you some questions now about what happened when you got robbed. You understand, yes, you felt a hand on your shoulder, you felt a hand on your face, you fell to the ground, etc. We're going to move quickly through that, okay? Now, in a little while, she's going to go to the police department, and she's going to make a description, and that description won't match our person, okay? What are we going to do now? We're going to slow it up, okay? And you went to the, I want to ask you some questions about what happened when you went to the police station. You know, they sat you down, you spoke with Detective Smith and Officer Jones, they asked you some questions, they told you to tell them, you know, again, we could go on, you know, I told you to tell them what happened, told you to tell them everything you could remember about the person that robbed you, all the distinct features, all the distinct characteristics. You know, then another transition, I want to ask you some questions now about the description that you gave them, okay? So we're going to slow this down, okay? Speed up when it comports with our theory, slow it down when it comports with our theory, okay? A second concept is basically stopping. Imagine you're running your cross through a video camera, and I want you all tomorrow to work on doing a freeze frame, okay? And by that I mean, you know, imagine you're seeing your cross through a video and you're going to freeze the frame, okay, in a theory-based way. Okay, again, jurors are going to remember, they're going to create they're going to create images in their head, but you've got to help them get there, all right? And what I want you all to do is think, for instance, let's say, if you had the statement case, right? We might freeze the frame on that interrogation room like we did before, right? I want to ask you some questions now about the interrogation room. You understand? Yes, it's 10 by 10, etc. And you're going to freeze the frame on that interrogation room, okay? A third thing I want you all to think about is taking, on your cross, going from the wide lens, let's say you freeze it on a frame, and now you're going to go to a narrow lens, okay? And you're going to focus on something in particular. So if we go back to our victim in the case, in the robbery case, maybe we've gone through, quickly, her getting pushed down, knocked over, the hand hitting her in the face, but now we want to establish gun focus, right? Gun focus is important in these cases, or, it could be a gun or knife. If somebody comes up and says, give me all your money, it's not like, yeah, let me get a good look at your face now, huh? You know what I mean? It doesn't happen that way. There's a reason why gun focus is out there. So, maybe what we're going to do then is you're going to take this third concept and you're going to narrow, all right, your video onto the gun. And I'd like to ask you some questions now about the gun that you saw, assuming she gave a description of the gun to the police, right? About the gun you saw when you were robbed, you understand?
Yes.
It was silver,
Yes.
shiny,
Yes.
with about a 4-inch barrel
Right.
and a wooden handle,
Yes.
and the whole thing was about 8 inches long.
Yes.
Okay, you see what we're doing now? What we're doing is we're taking her, we're going to paint a word picture, create an image, and that image is going to comport with our theory of the case and support our theory of the case to create our gun focus, okay? So, this, by the way, is something you could practice. Occasionally, you might want to practice this. Keith, I don't think we have time for red light green. Maybe we'll do it in the small groups or something. Something that you can practice. Just practice. Ideally, imagine that you're on the telephone talking to somebody, and the person on the other end is a professional artist. Okay, what you would want to be able to do through them is have them describe something to the extent where they're going to make as accurate a rendition of what it is you're describing as possible. Does that make sense? Think about that, and it's a good skill to work on, okay? So, you've got your cross-examination, here we go, next, thank you so much. You've got your cross-examination all prepared, right? You've got your beautiful transition followed by your series of statements. Everything's ready to go, nothing can go wrong, right? Somebody's laughing. What's so funny about that? Does shit go wrong? Anybody ever have a problem controlling a witness? Only me? I'm the only one? Okay. Let's talk for a minute about controlling the witness, okay? Well, I like to think really of this as controlling the greater battle of credibility, okay? Basically, it's going to come in four basic areas. You're going to get a non-responsive witness. You're going to get a non-responsive run-on witness. You're going to get a responsive run-on witness. And then you're just going to get the jackass that just wants to pause after every statement and doesn't want to answer. Okay, we'll deal with that last. That's least important. When we talk about controlling the witness on cross-examination, this may be contrary to what some people tell you, but I really believe control is our goal, but not our God. Okay? Control is our goal, but not our God. All right? Control is our goal because given our right to have our relevant statements affirmed, we want to get the witness to say what we want them to say. Okay? And we want to control the content of the story on cross. We want to control the presentation of the story on cross. We want to control the cadence. Okay? And we really don't want any deviation whatsoever, any messing around from the witness, no interplay. Okay? That's not our purpose. And by the way, what you'll see is when you cross using the transitions we talked about, followed by short statements, you're going to have a built-in control mechanism, okay? The witness is just going to be there saying yes to every statement that you give, okay? The reason that, I like to think of control as being our goal but not our God is basically because of the basic premise that any witness that wants to can deny us control. right? Anybody ever seen that in a courtroom where you got a witness that's just gonna mess with you? Okay, so any witness that wants to can deny us control, okay? So, we're gonna be willing to give up control in one situation. And that's where the witness that doesn't give us the answer we want, usually that's gonna be a yes answer, okay, looks bad, unfair, or incredible, okay, is evasive, or a subtle or not so subtle liar, and is destroying their own credibility and pissing off the jury. Okay, so in that situation, we're willing to give up control, all right? Situation where you come home as a teenager and your mother says, well, what'd you do at your friend Cindy's house last night? And you say, geez, Mom, that tornado 3 weeks ago was really strange, huh? Right? Or, your spouse or significant other says, well, I hope you're not cheating on me, are you? And you say, well, geez, the Cardinals are having a great year. Right? What's going on there? Tell me, what's going on when that happens? I'm sorry? Speak up. Come on, you're defense lawyers now. Speak up. Avoiding the question, right? How does it look? What do you say if you're that mother or you're the spouse that asks? Well, what are you thinking? You're lying, right? Okay. So this is what we're talking about when we are willing to give up control in this situation. Because when the witness is going to go ahead and not give us the answer to our statement, they're going to create, dissonance between themselves and the jurors. Okay? There's going to be a credibility issue there, and the jury simply is not going to believe them. Now, when I started practicing, I was a young public defender, and I started practicing, and man, it drove me nuts, right? That every cop wouldn't say yes to everything I said, and man, I really needed them all to say yes to everything. But I wish I learned a little bit earlier that a lot of the cases we get, we're not going to win sometimes unless the cops fuck with us. Right? Okay? It's a fact. When you get the drop case and officer says, Mr. Jones dropped the drugs, and then I saw him, picked him up, and arrested Mr. Jones, well, that's open and shut. Right? All the guy's got to do is take the stand and be credible, and the guy's going to go down. But it's when I learned that, I started to impeach with an inconsistent statement, and I said, well, officer, when you made your report, you wanted to be complete. He'd say, well, counsel, I don't know, kind of complete, but, there's only so many hours in a day. Right? But you wanted to be accurate. Well, counsel, as accurate as I could. Right? Okay, good stuff, isn't it? You wanted to be truthful. What's he going to say to that one, right? That's why we save that last. That's your complete, accurate, truthful trilogy. Stick that in. That's a consistent statement, impeachment. Stick that in your pocket. But it wasn't until I came to understand that in a lot of cases, I'm not going to win unless the witnesses do this. Or if I have a chance at winning the case, when the witnesses do this, I stand a better chance at winning the case because the jury's going to dislike these witnesses. Okay? So let's talk for a few minutes about how not to deal with the problem. We don't want to ask the judge for help, right? Judge, will you please instruct the witness to answer yes or no? That's like saying, hey, I've lost control of the witness, help! Somebody, yeah, right? We don't want to do that, okay? We don't want to do that. It's a bullying tactic. It's just like that. Well, would you please say yes or no? If the answers to my questions are yes or no. That's bullying tactic stuff. That's prosecutor stuff. We leave that to them, okay? We're not going to ask the judge for help. And by the way, these judges, when they're not in the business of helping the prosecutor get elected governor, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get to their golf game, right? I'm glad Judge Johnson is gone. I'm not putting this on him, mind you. But what they're trying to do is get to their golf game. Okay, so when the problem gets bad enough and a witness keeps messing around with you, eventually the judge, and you're going to have the jerk up with the robe, right, is going to yell at the knucklehead on the stand that was called by the asshole at the prosecutor's table. What a beautiful thing, right? Can you imagine a better scenario in the courtroom than that? Okay, so eventually when it gets that bad, the judge is going to take care of it. So, none of that, Judge, will you help me, or Mr. Witness, say yes or no. Let's talk about how to deal with the problem. First and foremost, always make sure that the problem is with the witness and not with the statement you've made. Okay, we've all, I'm sure at some point, made a statement, probably on voir dire yesterday, I'll bet one or two people did, where you make a statement, or before you were probably asking questions on cross, and it comes out of your mouth, right? And before it gets to the witness, you're like, oh, shit. Right? You ever had that happen? And if you could, you'd reach out in the cloak and dive and grab it, but you can't, it's too late, okay? So make sure it's fair. When I say fair, that just means that it demands a yes answer. That doesn't mean that the statement is friendly, and that doesn't mean that the statement is easy, but just that it's fair, okay? It should be precise, clear, it shouldn't be ambiguous, all right? We want to stay away from conclusions and conclusory language. We want to stay away from subjective characterizations. We want to stay away from, qualifiers, modifiers, intensifiers, anything like that that's going to give the witness reason to mess with us. Now, a couple exceptions here are going to be, number one, if the witness gives you something, all right? The witness says, yeah, as I was walking, Ms. Jones, who's our robbery victim, yes, I was walking home, I was very tired. She says, very tired, good. Loop it, take it, and loop it, okay? Otherwise, she's probably not going to admit that. But if she gives it to you, great. The only other exception to that is in terms of plausibility. If you know that you're going to win in terms of plausibility, let's say you've got somebody in the interrogation setting and they were in the interrogation room for 51 hours, right? You could say, Mr. Smith was in the interrogation room for a long time. Okay, do I really care what the answer is? Not really, right? Because I'm going to show that 51 hours is a long time. The detective says yes, moves my story, moves my theory. If he says no, by the time I'm done, he's going to lose credibility, okay? So we want to be in the habit of creating word pictures to establish conclusions, all right? We want to be in the habit of establishing some of these conclusory things through series of statements, okay, or through word pictures, all right? Just think about a good story. It might bring you 90% of the way, but doesn't give you the 10% conclusion. We want to respect the jurors in terms of their ability to form conclusions and to come to conclusions, all right? The witness most often is not going to tell you they were scared or tired, etc. We've got to earn it. So you know that the officer's not going to say, well, yes, Joseph Murphy cooperated with me when I pulled him over, right? He's probably not going to say that. So we're going to establish that. I'd like to ask you some questions about what happened when you pulled Mr. Murphy over. You understand? Yes, you put on your overhead lights. Yes, as a signal for him to pull over. Yes, his car pulled over. Yes, to the right. Yes, next to the curb. Yes, and he then put it in park. Yes, basic verisimilitude, put it in park, right? Otherwise the guy would be rolling forward, right? Let him say, oh, I don't know, counsel, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, who cares, right? We all know, the jurors all know, we put the car in park, it says, well, most cases, we've all, those of us who've done DUI work know sometimes. You get the guy with the foot on the brake, and yeah, that's a different story. So think about earning it, okay? Somebody was drunk, they're not gonna say they were drunk, all right? Use your series of statements in a story form to show that they were at the bar for so long, had so many drinks, etc. Same thing, big, subjective characterizations we've got to be careful of. Big man, what's a big man to you, Meg? How tall is a big man?
Like 6'5".
6'5". How tall is a big man?
6'1".
6'1". How tall is a big man?
6'2".
6'2", right? Three different things. Big man, subjective characterization. Geez, think about baggy pants, right? Difference between baggy pants in 2010 and 1970, right? Totally different game. Geez, everyone's too young for that. But anyway, and a lot to drink, right? Well, you had a lot to drink. Well, if you're Nord or Amish, one drink might be too much, right? If you're old world Irish, fucking 8 pints of Guinness and you're barely wetting your whistle. You know what I mean? So, by the way, that reminds me, I had a case one time where a guy was charged with stealing some Guinness. And, I've represented people that killed 3 people and were accused of raping folks and doing this and killing and molesting and doing all sorts of shit and duct tape over the face, the worst shit you can imagine. But this guy stole someone's Guinness. I thought to myself, you son of a bitch. But then you know what? The true public defender in me came out. I said, this guy, he deserves a better lawyer than anybody I've ever represented. This guy exercised such great taste. Okay. Okay, so think about your subjective characterizations. You know, it's one thing to say, fair to say, you don't want to go back to jail. It's another thing to say, well, fair to say you lied today to get the deal that you got. Ain't happening. Okay, so watch your statement. Respect the power, you know, respect the rule of conclusions, empower your audience, know when to say when. You know what I mean? Let your jurors draw those conclusions after you've established something on your through your series of statements, okay? So make sure when you get a control issue tomorrow, and when you get home, make sure first off that the problem's with the witness, not with the statement you made, okay? Then you want to think about the type of witness you've got, all right? Because we're going to have to come back to our demeanor, and we got to think about the demeanor that's going to be appropriate as we go to, as we say, potty train the witness, okay? We want to think about the appropriate demeanor. When we talk about, getting confrontational with a witness when when you've got a control problem, keep in mind, it's really not about you and the witness, okay? You've got to recognize what kind of witness this is. Are they sympathetic or not so sympathetic? Is it a witness that you simply need to kind of get back on track, or is it somebody that's totally out of control? You know, are they a child, a snitch? Are they a no-good lying SOB snitch? Or are they just maybe a snitch that's just kind of lying to get out of a little bit of a pinch? Okay, think about who you've got. It's not about you and the witness, nor for that matter is it about what you feel the witness has invited, okay? Your level of severity and civility in terms of controlling a witness is going to be dictated by what level of severity and civility the jury will find acceptable, okay? We don't jump at the first invitation. You know, there's going to be a time when the witness is going to mess with you and you're going to say, hey, I'm going to get some attitude. It's probably not the right time in general, all right? You got to think about it. Again, we're coming into court as defense lawyers. Most witnesses, as they come into court, are very high. You know, the jurors are going to be empathizing with them, okay? Jurors are going to like them to start out with. They're not going to like us. We've got to understand that. So when you think it's the first time to get a little attitude with them, it's probably not that time. Keep in mind, too, that sometimes you've got a situation where, in a homicide case or some kind of case where you've done extensive pretrial motions and motions to suppress statement and lineup and all the rest, and you and the detective have gone toe-to-toe during the course of 10-hour hearings on pretrial motions, and you snarl at each other and he flips you off on anybody ever had that happen? Only detectives flips you off on the stand and all that, right? And you're flipping him off as a no, just kidding. But you get this background. Well, keep in mind the jury doesn't know about this background. Okay, the jury's doesn't know about any of the relationship between you and this detective. Okay, so when you think it's time to go, it's probably not time to go. Be guided by what the jurors will find acceptable. Okay, keep in mind you don't have to be cross to do cross. This old idea of cross-examination being, this attack, pillage, and plunder is something of the past, all right? We're in the business of communication and persuasion, okay? We gotta understand that for the jury to like us and for us to win the case, they gotta like us, okay? They gotta like us, they gotta like us. Tony talked about the halo horns effect. Remember that? He was talking about halo and horns. We got to make sure and cross particularly when it comes to controlling a witness, that we've got the halo and that the witness has the horns. If you do that, you're going to win. You're going to gain that ethos. You're going to be the person they like. You're going to be the truth teller. You're going to be the person that they're going to rely on for the truth. Okay. So when we talk about how to deal with these issues, nip it in the bud or it'll spread like wildfire. At the first sign of it, you got to let the witness know you're not going to put up with it. This process can be painful, but disobedience is going to be the most painful thing, okay? You're telling the story, you're controlling the story, nip it in the bud immediately, all right? Let's talk, and again, this is going to be a relatively simplistic thing. When we talk about first the non-responsive witness, you saw a car, yes, the car was going westbound. Well, counsel, I was eating lunch with my friend, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Non-responsive witness, what we're going to do is you're simply going to repeat your statement. Okay? Repeat your statement. Okay? And you're basically going to do that until you get the answer. And what you're going to see is the witness, probably 85% of the time when you repeat your statement, the witness is gonna say yes, okay? They're gonna go with me, okay? Non-responsive witness, we repeat our statement. Now, certain people have different things they do in terms of severity and civility. They might say, excuse me, I'm sorry, maybe, well, you saw a car, yeah, the car was going westbound. Oh, counsel, I was eating lunch and blah, blah, blah. The car, or they might say, I'm sorry, maybe I confused you with my question. The car was going westbound, right? Or maybe you didn't understand my question or something to that effect, okay? But basically, the answer there is simply to repeat, okay? Repeat your statement and repeat it word for word, okay? When we talk about a responsive run-on witness, which is sort of the second, I guess sort of a hybrid, really. The witness, did I say responsive or non-responsive, okay? Non-responsive run-on witness is going to be the witness that didn't answer and now they're going to run on. Same thing applies. Repeat your statement, okay? One caveat here is when a witness is running on, giving you long bullshit answers that have nothing to do with it, don't interfere with them. Okay, this goes back to one of Napoleon's rules of war. Don't interfere with the enemy when they're destroying themselves. Okay, when that witness is up there pissing off the jury, wasting the jurors' time by going on with these long, non-responsive run-on answers, don't interfere. Okay, an exception might be where if they say something that you find to be extremely prejudicial, okay, something that's extremely prejudicial, usually something that's going to arise to the level of a mistrial or something like that, then okay, maybe you're going to stop, object, do something, you're going to make your record, but otherwise, let them go, and then repeat your statement, okay? The responsive run-on question poses sort of a different problem, okay? This is where the witness, you say you saw a car, and the car was going westbound on Madison, and they're going to say, yes, and I was eating my lunch, having a good time with my friends at the time, okay? Now, what's happened here is the witness has technically answered the question, or, affirmed your statement, but there's a problem, okay? The problem is they keep running on. So, from a credibility standpoint, we really don't mind this, right? We've got the same person that, well, you cheated on me, spouse, well, the Cardinals are having a great year. Same concept, right? In terms of what the witness is doing to themselves, we have no problem with this. The problem is that in addition to answering, affirming our statement, they're running on. And in doing so, what they're doing is they're messing with our storytelling, they're interrupting our storytelling, and we don't want this. So, what's going to happen, though, from a practical standpoint? Witness says yes, and then runs on, and your inclination tells you to do what?
Just answer my question.
Repeat yourself, I'm sorry?
Just say, just answer my question.
No,
No?
we're not going to say just answer.
No,
Repeat.
that was your.
Oh, yeah, repeat your statement, okay? Your inclination is going to be to repeat your statement. Okay, again, what's going to happen when you repeat your statement?
Objection.
Objection, what's the objection? Cumulative, actually, but yeah, right? Objection, cumulative, what's the judge going to do? Sustain. All right, he's going to sustain it. Here's what we're going to do. In that situation, we're going to use our looping tool. Okay? We're going to use our looping tool. So, you saw a car going westbound. Yes, the car was going westbound on Madison Street. Well, counsel, yes it was, but I was having dinner with my friends, having a good time, blah, blah, blah. Objection, or I'm sorry, the car was going westbound on Madison Street.
Objection.
Sustain.
The car going westbound on Madison Street had 2 passengers. And the car going westbound on Madison Street had 2 passengers in the front seat. You see what I'm doing? What we're doing is we're going to loop it, okay? And we're going to loop it basically for 3 reasons. We're going to loop it because in doing so, we're kind of at a standstill. Again, the witness is destroying themselves in a sense because they're not being cooperative, because they're being evasive, and there's going to be clear dissonance between the witness and the jury. But again, our problem is they're interfering with our storytelling on cross. We use our looping tool. What it's going to do is it's going to help us regain control of the witness, number 1. It'll help us regain control of a story being told, number 2. And then third, and maybe most importantly, particularly where the language in that statement is important to us, we don't want that language to get lost in a long run-on answer. Okay, does that make sense? We don't want to lose that language in a long run-on answer, so we're going to loop that 2 or 3 times, okay, into our subsequent statements, okay? The last one, by the way, is, the witness that's going to give you a delayed response every time, I really just let them. right? Your preparation is going to the jury's going to see your preparation. You're going to have a beautiful cadence. You're prepared. They're going to be relying on you for the truth. And when you get some jackass on the stand that really just wants to sit there and they want to, delay after every statement, let them do it. They're going to piss off the jury. Again, don't interfere with your opponent while they're destroying themselves, okay? How we do? Are we just about, can we have one more slide, please? Are you good for like 5 more minutes, or are we?
Yeah.
I know it's been a long day. What time is it? Okay. Real quickly, a couple things. Let's talk about sequence organization. We talked a little bit about primacy and recency. Cross-examination, you've got a couple considerations. When you get up to cross primacy, when you're going to cross a witness, you're going to cross really in 2 areas. One is going to be facts dealing with guilt or innocence, and the other is going to be in the area of credibility. Okay? So you might want to think in terms of a powerful sequence that's going to make your story of innocence more powerful, right? And maybe that means that you're going to, again, these are suggestions. Every witness is different. Maybe you're going to start in an area of credibility and then move into, the facts dealing with guilt or innocence, so that by the time you come to the facts dealing with guilt or innocence, the jury knows that your person is a piece of crap already. Okay? Think about your sequence a little bit when you put your cross together. Primacy, let it be strong. Usually convicted felon is good, right? We can agree you're a convicted felon. Okay, good stuff. Lori Shanks had a beautiful one. You say your name is John Jones. That's not the name they call you in the gang. They call you Slick, which is the tattoo on your arm, yes, which is covered up by your T-shirt, yeah, that the prosecutor bought for you, etc. Okay, I mean, that's great stuff. You know what I mean? You're talking about primacy there when you've put about 5 or 6 bad things on this witness in a short series. So make your primacy count. There's a lot of drama in the primacy of a cross-examination. You got to seize that drama. Don't start out with your name unless your name is not guilty. Okay? Don't start out with your name at all. Start out with something significant. Likewise, with regard to recency, actors call this leaving something in the room. When you're going to sit down, we call it, I guess, the sit-down question, or really what is a statement? Fair to say you do anything not to go to jail? Yes. Slowly get over things, go back and sit down, and say nothing further, okay? Not this fair to say you do almost anything not to go back to jail? Yes, thank you very much. We stole something, all right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to run away like we stole something. Be in control. When your primacy and your recency, it's going to be a pause, a statement, an answer, and a pause. That's going to be your basic formula for it. Can we have the next slide, please, just for a minute, and then I'm going to wrap up here. I appreciate your patience here. A couple things real quickly. Pause and silence. Somebody asked Miles Davis once what it was that made his notes sound so good. He said, hey, it's the silence before and the silence afterward. Okay, think about that. Okay, that's what it's all about. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that in your opening statements. Think about using that pause and cross, and think about using the silence. Trilogies, we talked about a little bit. Great stuff. See if you can prepare maybe a thematic trilogy for one of the witnesses you're going to do tomorrow. Language or terms, very briefly, this is the only part of the trial when you get to put words into the mouth of the prosecution's witnesses, okay? Think in terms of language that supports your theory of the case. By the way, please, all tell me now you'll never call your client in court. Always call them by their name, whether you're getting a continuance or what you're doing. It's the first step we can take toward humanizing them. So please always call them by their name, not my client, etc. Okay? In terms of next week, you're going to cover impeachment. In terms of impeaching with an inconsistent statement. Well, you said today. That's assuming this is not true, right? You testified before, right? That's true. Testifying has a truth-telling component. Choose your language carefully. When you choose powerful language that's consistent with your theory, you're basically going to take that language and you're going to insert that. It's going to come out through the mouths of the prosecution witnesses, which is going to make your story more credible, your theory more credible. It's going to take your theory of the case and it's going to bypass the brain of the witness and the jurors, and you're going to inject it directly into their bloodstream, okay, by choosing powerful language. Podiums, lecterns, I mean, you use them to set notes, that's fine, but Don't lock behind them. If you don't have to believe me, just look at any great preacher. When they're talking about the Bible, they're up here, right? Where are they at when they're looking for some money? Right? Okay. Just go to your local church and see it. We see it all the time. When they're looking for money, they ain't back here, they're right down here, okay? Pens, I don't have up there, but don't stand up to cross with your pen. Get rid of it. Ever see people, they get up and they're like, man, I'm gonna cross-examine you and I'm gonna kick your fucking It's a bic! Look out, right? You know what I mean? Forget the pen, okay? Transition alternatives. Real briefly, we can use transitions as I talked about them. Sometimes maybe if you don't want to use a transition, we can do that in a number of other ways. We can do that through movement, right? You're crossing here. I'm sure a lot of you worked on this today with your openings. You can be, crossing here, pause. And then come over here and shoot away. Okay? You can do it with the emphasis in your voice, right? Any mom ever see this to you, Erica, right? You come home and she says, Erica, boy, what a great report card you got. But I got something to talk to you about. Right? You know what I'm saying? All that is basically just transitioning through the use of the tone in my voice, right? You can transition in different ways. The six senses, in terms of, think about, Keith mentioned this, six senses, storytelling, it's a great skill to have. It's great to interject. If you've got a snitch case particularly, you're talking about jail, what they hear the clanking of locks, they hear fights, they hear guards beating people up. What they see is fights, they see people getting beat up. What they smell, the crappy food, the lice disinfectant, the urine, the feces, the vomit, etc. And I'm not going to go into what they touch. All right? That's off limits for now. We'll talk about the folded-us letter later on. In terms of preparation, please prepare. Some lawyers say, well, no, I'm just that brilliant. I can stand up and cross any witness. I don't need to prepare. Okay, I'll tell you, there's probably about 0.5% of all the lawyers in the universe that are really that good. And even those that are that good would be 10 times better if they actually prepared this stuff. Something that Joe said that really rings true to me is that you got to represent every client like it's a person that's in your family. Okay? When you say to yourself, hey, should I file this motion, or should I take the time to go to the scene, or should I go get some photographs? All you got to do, ask yourself, if this is my brother that I was representing, would I do it? And if you say, yes, I would do it, please do it for your clients, okay? One more slide, please. Lasting smile, okay? It's difficult work we do, but, believe it or not, when you smile, your credibility goes up. All the communication people tell you that. Smile occasionally in court. Your credibility goes up. Don't overdo it if it's a kitty sex case. Right? You'll look a little bit creepy. Thank you all very much for listening.